Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about what to do when you have the negation of a conditional. Again, we're not interested, this video is not about this situation where you're trying to show the negation of a conditional. In this case, you would just say assume ID. You wouldn't say assume CD because you're not trying to show a conditional. You'd say assume ID and then you'd use if P then Q. That's not the situation we're interested in. What we're going to talk about in this video is what do you do when you have the negation of a conditional. So but let's back up. We're going to show the conclusion. We're going to apply assume ID because why not? And in fact we need to. And then we bring in our premise. And now what are we going to do? Our rules don't work. Negation of if P then Q. Modus ponens does not apply to that because what 3 says is can you get from P to Q? No. It's not the case that if P is true, then Q is true. So even if you had P, you wouldn't be able to apply modus ponens because what 3 is saying is you can't go from P to Q. In any case, line 2 is not P, so even if 3 wasn't a negation, if it was just if P then Q, you still wouldn't have what you need for modus ponens. So what should we do? Well, in fact, it's basically the same as what we did with conjunctions, or negations of conjunctions. When you have, remember, when you have negation of P and Q, what do? You get P and Q, and then you apply ID. So that's basically what we want to do here. But instead of getting P and Q, we want to get if P then Q. How do you get if P then Q? You show it. So we say show if P then Q. And once we get it, it's going to be very short actually. We're going to say 3, 4 ID because 4 and 3 contradict each other, right? So once we can, so in that way it's the same as the conjunction strategy. The difference is how do you get a conditional? You have to do a subderivation of it. But that's okay, we can do the subderivation of it. In fact, so we'll say assume CD. And in this case, we can see that, oh, we already have what we need for an indirect derivation because P and not P contradict one another. And so now we have, we did a very simple ID here. It's a weird ID. I'm going to say something about that in a minute, but just hold your questions about it being a weird ID. Just note that it is. So we got if P then Q, so now we have 3 and 4, which contradict each other, and we apply ID. Good. So when you have a negated conditional, you want to show if P then Q, and then again, once you do that, once you complete that subderivation, then you apply ID. Now, that said, there's something to note about this, which is this is a weird little subderivation because we started with a conditional assumption and we ended with an indirect derivation. That's okay. We've talked about mixed derivations. There's nothing in the derivation system that says the assumption has to match the boxing and canceling method. And it's a little bit weird that we say that they don't have to match in that way, but if we did say they had to match in that way, there'd be a whole bunch of things that would have to change and it would be more complicated. And we don't need that complication right now. There are other derivation systems where they say, oh, when you make an assumption, it has to match the kind of your method of boxing and canceling. So if you say assume CD, you have to box and cancel with CD. Those are more involved, they're more complicated, we're not using those. So we say assume CD, we get P, and then we say, oh, well, look, I have the contradiction of P. I have the negation of P, so I have a contradiction. So what's weird here is, it's kind of weird, you start, say, assume CD, and then you do this ID. And the other thing is, you can get to a conditional if the antecedent of the conditional is false. That's weird. English conditionals and other natural language conditionals don't work like that, but this one does. And so you want to be clear, there are really two things that we're pointing out here. One is, if you have a negated conditional, show the conditional for ID. 2 is, sometimes it's really easy to show conditional. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is, because you only need the negation of the antecedent, or as we'll see in the next derivation, the consequent. So, again, we're going to show the conclusion, not Q. Okay, in this case, we'll again make an indirect assumption. Now we'll bring in our premise. It's not if P then Q. Okay, so again, what do we do when we have the negation of a conditional? Well, we cannot use MP, we cannot use MT. What are we going to do with it? We're going to show its unnegation. Now we'll say assume CD. Now here, assume CD actually is irrelevant because look, what's for? It's a conditional. How do you box and cancel a conditional? Well, one way to do it is with CD. Normally you do it with CD. In the previous derivation we did it with ID, but normally you do it with CD. And hey, there's that Q, which is the consequent. And what do we need? That's what we need. So again, because we have the consequent of line of if P then Q, we can move it down and apply CD. And again, we have our contradiction. So again, we see when you have a negated conditional, what do you want to do? Show the conditional, and it might be pretty easy to get the conditional because you have the negation of the antecedent or the consequent already, and either way, you'll be able to box and cancel very quickly. So let's pull some of this different stuff we've been talking about together. Here our conclusion is P and Q. Well, how did we talk about showing P and Q? We said show P and then show not, or in this case P and not Q, excuse me. So how do we want to do that? We're going to say show P, and then we're going to say show not Q, and then we're going to put them together, and that's going to be a direct derivation. So now we have to see, okay, how do we put P and not Q together? So let's do that. So let's start with the subderivation of P, and we'll say assume ID, because now there's no obvious subderivation strategy to pursue here. And now let's bring in our premise. Oh, there's the negation of a conditional. What do we do with that? We show the conditional. Let's make our conditional assumption. Oh, hey, this is what we just saw before, because now we have the contradiction between P and not P. So that's an indirect derivation. So we said show if P then Q. We say assume CD, which is P, and we notice quickly, if we're paying attention, that, oh, well, we already have a contradiction, so we're already set up for ID. Now that we've shown if P then Q, we have a contradiction between if P then Q on line 5 and not if P then Q on line 4, so we say 4, 5 ID. Are we done? No, because what we've done is we've shown P, which is the left disjunct. Now we need to show the right the right conjunct. We've shown the left conjunct. Now we need to show the right conjunct. Okay, let's make, oops, I did that too quickly. So we'll say show conj, and this time we want not Q. So again, we'll say assume ID. Let's bring in our premise. We're going to use our premise again. That's fine, no problem with that. We use the premise to get P, and now we're going to use the premise to get not Q. And we're going to use it in the same way, in the way we've already seen. It's a negated conditional. What do you do with a negated conditional? You show the conditional. And in this case, we're not even going to bother with the conditional assumption because Q is what we need for CD. So now we can put 12 and 13 together, or apply ID to 12 and 13 because they contradict one another. And that boxes and cancels line 10. And so now we can put 2 and 10 together, and that's our derivation, our direct derivation of P and not Q. So if you have the negation of a conditional, again, show the conditional. And if you're working on a conjunction, show each conjunct, and you may reuse the premises. In this case, there's just one premise, and from that one premise, not if P then Q, we can extract both P and not Q. It's a very strong premise. Okay, so we've got one more problem. So let's take a look at this last problem. So we'll say show the conclusion and assume ID and our premise and our second premise. So let's see. We do have the negated conditional. Okay. But we also have some other stuff. So let's see what we can do with that. So we got not R on line 2 and we've got R or Q on line 4. Can we put those together? Yes, we can with MTP. We have Q. Now we're stuck, and so now we want to go and look at line 3 and say, good, I want to show if P then Q. And now we can just do what we've been doing. We can bring R down and apply CD to Q, or we can bring Q down with R and then apply CD to Q, because 7 is the consequent of line 6. And now we have 3, 6, ID, because 6 is the negation of 3, right? We have if P then Q, and then the negation of that on line 3, and our derivation is over. So I hope you're getting some sense of how this works. If you have negation if P then Q, and the derivation gets stuck, then show if P then Q, and when you're done with that, when you've canceled, after canceling if P then Q, then apply ID. You don't do that ID inside. You have to get if P then Q, and once you have it, first you try to show it, and once you've shown it, once you've canceled the show line, then you can use it with not if P then Q. You're not probably going to use not when you do this subderivation. You're probably not going to use this in the subderivation. Right here we used Q. In all of these we did not bring this inside of the subderivation. This comes from something else, and then we put these two together. Right here, this comes from Q, which comes from R or Q and not R. And then this then turns around and contradicts that. Okay, so I hope that's helpful in terms of showing you what to do with negated conditionals. And remember, this is what to do if you have them. If you're trying to show them, you just make an indirect assumption, and then you have the conditional, and you use the conditional. If you have a negated conditional, then you want to show the conditional, because then you can apply ID to box and cancel whatever it is that you're separately trying to show. Okay, good. If you have questions, please let me know.